Good morning and welcome to week 4 of our Roman series. This morning, I want to talk about another one of those big topics, another one of those big themes that seems to find itself all throughout this letter. And it's the idea of judging others. Now, I understand, judging others, it's something that we have evolved beyond, is it not? Yeah, we don't judge others in our lives. We have moved beyond this. We've evolved past this way of being in the world. We've evolved past or beyond this behavior. But Paul seems to think this is a really big issue. This is actually one of the main reasons why Paul writes this letter, I think. If we remember back to the first week, one of the questions I asked was, why did Paul write Romans? One of the reasons was because he wanted to promote unity. There were certain people that were creating divisions, and he has a very clear message for the people creating divisions. He has a very clear message for the Christians, the followers of Jesus, that he's writing to. We read this in week 1, but Romans 16, verse 17, I urge you, brothers, to watch out for those who cause divisions and put obstacles in your way that are contrary to the teaching you have learned. Keep away from them. What has Paul been teaching them? I mean, if there's anything that they learned from the way of Jesus, it's the way of peace, the way of unity. I mean, it's the way of bringing people together, of healing. This is why, for Paul, one of the main reasons why he wrote this letter, he was annoyed. He was ticked off because there were people in their community who were working to separate, to tear apart, to create divisions. I mean, think about the world that we live in today. We all know people. It seems like their main goal in life is to create division. It seems like their whole thing, the whole reason why they exist is because they want to tear things apart. They don't want to build things up. They simply want to tear things down. And I understand, tearing certain things down, good, necessary. Certain things are evil, they're wrong, and they need to be torn down. But then we have to work together to put the pieces back together. We need people in our world, we need people in our lives who are working for peace, who are working to unite us, not to create more division and to create more rifts. I mean, we have way too much of that. We have enough of those people. And Paul's message for those who simply want to tear apart and not build back up, keep away from them. They're not following the path of Jesus. They're not helping us move forward together. So for Paul, he writes this letter because there is massive tension. There are divisions that are beginning to create some serious problems in these Christian communities in Rome. And he wants to let this group, he wants to let his people know, stay away from them because they're not going to lead you down the path that you truly want to walk down. They're not going to lead you down the path of Jesus, which that's the path that you want to walk, the path of life, joy, love, and grace. Paul's saying, you want to walk down that path, stay away from those that will create divisions and lead you away from peace. Now, a bit of historical background on the Christian community in Rome. If we remember back to week 1, the Christian church in Rome was comprised of Jewish Christians and then non-Jewish or Gentile Christians. Two very, very different groups, very different in their beliefs, very different in their worldview. The way in which they made sense of the world, the way in which they understood God and what it meant to follow God, very, very different. So they are coming together for the first time, trying to figure things out. They're coming together with all of their past, with their history, with their beliefs, their varying beliefs. I mean, there's a wide spectrum of beliefs. They're coming together, trying to figure out what does it mean for all of us together to follow Jesus. And obviously, there would have been a whole bunch of tension just right from the start. But then things get a little more complicated. Because in 49, Common Era, the emperor, the Caesar of the time, Claudius, he expels at least a portion of the Jewish population from Rome. There are disturbances because of Christus, which scholars believe would have been Christ. So because of these disturbances, because the Jewish population, Jewish followers of Jesus specifically, because they're not playing by the rules, because they are pledging their devotion, giving their worship, their praise to a different Lord than Caesar, the emperor says, I want you guys out. Leave. I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay in Rome. Wherever you go is fine by me, but you have to stop these disturbances. So in 49, a portion of the population leaves. And then a new Caesar takes over, Nero, and he forgets about this decree. And as a result of this, because he forgets, a lot of the people who had left, they begin to return to Rome. And this happens right before Paul writes his letter of Romans. And when these Jewish Christians returned, they found that things were pretty different than before they had left. They came back to a faith, to a religion, to a community that looked very, very different. Scott McKnight, in his book, Reading Romans Backwards, he says this about the return of the Jewish Christians. The return of these Jewish Christians created tensions. Remember, there was already tension before, them trying to figure out how to live together. Now it created even more tension, for it seems nearly certain that the expelled returned to lesser roles and status. In the beginning, maybe there was some more equality, and everyone's voice was being heard. Now they've returned, and they found that the Gentile Christians, they've started running the show. Their voice has become the dominant voice. Their way of following Jesus, their practices have become the dominant, if not the only practices of these Roman Christians. He continues, during their exile, the Gentile Christians formed a new Christian culture, and it was not a Torah-observant culture. For the Jewish Christians, Torah was still the center of their faith. That had been their tradition for hundreds, thousands of years. Torah was central to what it meant to honor and to follow God. And now you had a new group of people, Gentile Christians, who were becoming a part of your tradition. Remember, Jesus did not come to start a new religion. He came to fulfill his tradition, his Jewish tradition. So for the Jewish Christians, well, they just considered that continuing to observe Torah and to follow Torah, that was just part of it. That's how you did things. The Gentile Christians came in and they said, no. Torah, that's great for you, but it's not for us. We've seen things differently. We have a different path. And so it's almost like you had this division, right? You had this split where there were these two different voices, and one group was saying one thing, this is how we follow Jesus, and the other group was saying, you're wrong, this is actually how we follow Jesus. I mean, just think about it, where things are a certain way, you leave, you go on vacation, you go away you have an extended trip, a couple of months, 6 months, you come back, everything is different. Everything that you have helped create has been torn down, and something entirely new is in its place. You're going to be a bit annoyed. You're going to be ticked off to a certain degree. And to make matters even worse, within Rome, the Jewish population was not looked upon favorably. There was an extremely negative attitude towards the Jewish population. Remember, they were expelled. They were the troublemakers. And this attitude, it seems to have spilled over into the church. Probably wouldn't have been looked upon very favorably when all those who had been expelled started coming back. I mean, the Gentile Christians, they got into a groove. They had a rhythm. And now they had to discover a new groove, a new rhythm. And they had to learn it with people who didn't agree with them. Yeah, you ever find yourself there? You're trying to find a way forward with people that don't always agree with you, that don't see eye to eye. It creates problems. There's certain levels of tension. There's nights you go home and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how much longer can I do this for? When are they going to leave? Or do I have to leave, right? I mean, all of these thoughts go through our head when we're trying to work with people that we don't always agree with, and we actually see things quite differently. And so Paul, he writes this letter because he wants this group to become a family. So he's writing because he wants to address, how do they live together? How do they form a family together? I mean, it's hard enough to be a group of people living together, right? I mean, think about that question. How do we form a family? How do we live together? Those are questions that we are all asking. How do we get along together? I mean, I feel like I'm asking that question about different groups all the time, right? How do we get along together, especially when we don't always agree? And so Paul, he doesn't want more division. He wants peace. He wants them to figure out how to do this thing together, how to be the people of God together. And one of the ways in which these divisions manifest themselves, it's in the act of judging each other. One group judges the other. The other group returns the favor. Both groups saying, our way is better. Our way is the best way. We are right and you are wrong. And instead of learning to live with each other, what seems to be happening is the other group is judging the others and believing themselves to be morally superior. We are the ones who are right. We are the ones who know the best way forward. You are wrong, so you have to listen to us because clearly we are in the know. I mean, just listen. Here's a couple of verses we'll look through. And again, this shows up multiple places throughout the letter. You can read through the letter and you'll just keep coming back to this idea of judgment. But Romans chapter 14, Paul writes, "Accept him whose faith is weak, without passing judgment on disputable matters." So obviously, there's some gray areas in the faith. Following Jesus produces gray areas. We're not all going to agree on things. And Paul seems to believe that is okay. How do we live in the tension? How do we live in the gray areas? I know for us in the modern church, we don't like hearing that. We like things black and white. There's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. But clearly, to Paul, there are gray things. There are disputable matters. And we're to live in harmony despite seeing things differently. I mean, is that not we could stop right there. That's a sermon itself. Is that not a message that we need for our world today? We're not going to always agree, but let's work for peace, for unity, for love. Let's work for every single person winning, no one being left behind. Let's work on creating communities where everyone is heard. Yeah. I mean, this verse, we could stop right there. I mean, we have a sermon already. Paul continues, "One man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man, whose faith is weak, eats only vegetables." He's not talking about veganism. Now, the man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not, and the man who does not eat everything must not condemn the man who does, for God has accepted him. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? Who are you? I love that. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? Like, what's wrong with you? Who do you think you are? Do you really think you are that much more superior to everyone else? I mean, who are you? To his own master he stands and falls. You are not his master. You're on equal terms. So stop acting like you're the master of everyone else. Stop acting like you're in charge, like you know best. That's great for you, but hey, that's great for them. To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand. Now verse 14, or chapter 14, 15 as well, they continue talking about there's those who are weak in the faith and those who are strong in the faith. And you can pick up any good commentary and you'll discover what scholars have believed about who the strong are and who the weak are. I don't want to get into that right now, but obviously the strong are people who seem to have more freedom. They're not as restricted, while the weak seem to be a little more bounded. And Paul's saying, that's okay. There's room for all of us. There's room for everyone. We shouldn't look down on each other, but we should accept all of us, regardless of where we fall on the spectrum. And then, just a couple more verses here. Verse 13. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. It's like, a Saturday Night Live sketch? Stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. Stop passing judgment. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in another's way. Verse 22. So whatever you believe about these things, if you think someone else is wrong, if you disagree with them, whatever you believe, keep them between yourself and God. Go and pray about it. Go for a walk and just vent your frustration. But whatever you do, don't start vomiting all of that on everyone else. Don't start telling everyone how they are wrong and you know how they should live their life. That's between them and God. So you go and you live out your faith with God, but let them have their own relationship with God. Don't act like a mediator. We don't need that. That doesn't help anyone. That just worsens things. So as we see, Paul he's pretty big on this. Now, the reason for the judging, as we've seen, is because it's all about boundaries. It's all about deciding who's in and who's out. These groups, they're acting like the moral police. They're the theological gatekeepers. You can believe this, you can do this, but you can't believe this, you can't do this. And if you see things this way, or if you choose to live with this particular behavior, then clearly you're outside the boundaries. Who's establishing the boundaries, though? Each group. And each group is saying, our boundaries are right. I mean, this isn't surprising, right? We do this all the time. Our group is the right group, and every other group is wrong. It's a question of who has access to God. The one group is saying, we are the ones who have access to God, and everyone else who doesn't follow by our rules, who doesn't stay in the lines that we're drawing, who doesn't stay in the circle that we've drawn, everyone else outside of that, well, they don't have access to God. How arrogant is this? Yet we do this all the time in our world. I mean, the church, I wish I could say that the church has moved beyond this, that as a church we have heeded the words of Paul. But have we? I mean, we have right now in our world, you can look this up, coalitions, theological coalitions, in order to distinguish and determine what is the right way of believing things and what is the wrong way of believing things. I mean, the church, studies have been done. What is the church known for? Being judgmental, hypocritical, for being a group that sets boundaries, not allowing access to God. I mean, this is the very thing that Paul is combating, yet 2,000 years later, as followers of Jesus, we're doing the same things. These words, this message of Paul, I mean, can you not see his heart? He's pleading for these followers of Jesus, for us as followers of Jesus, to be different in the world, to stop passing judgment, to stop trying to prevent access to God, and instead living out our faith in a way that brings peace and unity. I mean, judging each other, one of the things that, you want to tear a community apart, just start judging each other. Start seeing yourself as morally superior to everyone else. You'll have division. You'll have what we see existing in the church today. Gatekeepers. People claiming to know who's in, who's out. People claiming to know the mind of God. Paul's words, though, hey, you're not the master. That's God. That's who God is. So allow God to be the master, and you simply go and live out your faith and let others have their relationship with God. Now let's talk a bit about the people that make up church. Why is it that church can become so judging? Because the problem with just talking simply about the church is kind of a high-level idea, but let's get down to ground level. Because church is made up of people. So you can say the church is judgmental all you want, but it's the people in the church who act in certain ways. So let's talk a bit about why we as people, why we as humanity tend to gravitate towards judgment. And I see this in myself all the time. I wish it wasn't so, but man, I see this all the time. I remember a couple of years ago in one of an old neighborhood that we used to live in. I would go for walks in the neighborhood, and there was this one dilapidated house. This house, it was in rough shape. Every single time I would walk by this house, immediately, my first thought would be, what is wrong with the people that live in this house? Why can't they keep up with their house? I would just start judging them automatically. I created a narrative in my head that said there is something wrong with them. I'm able to keep up with my property. Why can't they? That's exactly where my mind went. Then I started asking myself, well, why did I move into judgment instead of compassion? Why didn't I start asking or creating a narrative or a different narrative, right? The questions I could have asked could have been, okay, what's happening with this family? Is there someone sick who lives in the house? Maybe they live alone and they got sick and so they can't take care of the house. Maybe medical bills are piling up and they're not able to pay to have certain repairs done. What if someone just suffered the death of a loved one and they're going through a time of depression and they just have absolutely no energy to do anything? What if someone lost a job and as a result they are having trouble making ends meet and they can barely put food on the table, right? Myself, I moved right into judgment and crafting a narrative of judgment instead of a narrative of compassion. We often turn to judgment before getting curious. What if whenever we see something that looks a bit off, or what if we come across someone or we hear about someone, because often this happens at a distance, right? We judge people through our television sets or through what we hear about them on the news. But what if instead of moving immediately into judgment, we started getting curious? What's been going on in their lives? Or let's talk about beliefs. Why do they hold that belief? What if we come across someone who believes completely differently than us? What if we started asking a bit and started looking under the surface a little? What have they experienced in their life that has shaped them in this particular way? Why do they hold that belief? Why is that belief, why is it important to them? There's a reason why you hold your beliefs. Your beliefs are important to you. You've been shaped in a certain way. You've experienced certain things. All of your experiences, everything that you've gone through in life, it shaped you. It has formed your beliefs. So what if instead of seeing ourselves as morally superior and the ones who are in the right, instead of automatically just saying, well, they're wrong, what if we started getting curious? What if instead of walking by that broken down house, we started passing judgment, thinking that there is something wrong with them? What if we started getting curious? What's been happening in their life? What are they going through? Is there any hurt that they're dealing with? The first step to avoiding judgment is getting curious, asking all sorts of questions. Why is this person the way that they are? It's having a conversation. And dialogue, conversation, it is a skill that we are lacking in the 21st century. I remember when I was going to seminary, there was one person that every time I saw him, I just would turn my nose up and start thinking to myself, this person is a jerk. I do not like him at all. No reason. Never spoke to him, just simply saw him in the hallways. Once I finally met him, he became like one of my best friends. I still talk with him today. But I remember during that time, those couple of months when I was judging him and passing judgment on him, I started asking myself a whole bunch of questions. Okay, why don't I like him? What is he calling out in me? Whenever we find ourselves starting to judge another person, I think it's really important for us to pause, to stop for a moment and ask ourselves, what is the judging calling out in me? Oftentimes, at the root of judging others is the fact that we see something of ourselves in another person and we don't like it. Maybe it's a sin. Maybe someone does something that we struggle with and we see it in them and we end up displacing, right? Richard Rohr has this great quote. He says, "We hate our flaws most in others." We hate our flaws most in others. We distance ourselves from the thing that's inside of us. We know it's there, but instead of having to be honest about it, instead of having to deal with it, be truthful about it, we hate that in another person. And so we can displace our hatred, our dislike, and now we start judging. And what's wrong with them that they do that? I mean, you'll see this time and time again. Preachers, they have one particular sin or something that they're constantly speaking out against. And then it comes out months later, years later, that the very thing that they were speaking out against is something that they themselves were going through. We hate our flaws the most in others. Sometimes we look at another person and we see our past in them. Maybe we see an earlier version of ourselves in another person. And oftentimes we'll judge them, we'll dislike them because we don't like where we've been. We don't like that the way that they're acting, the way that they see things, beliefs that they hold, well, they were part of an earlier version of ourselves. We often look back on our past with disdain. We don't like our past. I mean, think about middle school. We begin to, we get really uncomfortable with our past. And seeing another person who is embodying where we used to be, it makes us uncomfortable. So oftentimes we'll see someone and we'll begin judging them because they remind us of who we used to be. Other times, the judging can be calling out an inaction or the inaction that we ourselves are taking. There's something that someone is doing. We think it's wrong. We think that it's a problem and that someone should do something about it. And so we begin judging other people, but in reality, the reason why we're so upset is because we know that we're someone who should be doing something about what they're embodying. Not passing judgment on them, but speaking out in a certain way for something, supporting a cause, putting into action the things that we believe. So other people, it can call out our inaction. So oftentimes, if we would just stop and ask ourselves, okay, what is the judging calling out in me? We would begin to get to the root of why we dislike that person so much. And then something else that I think judging calls out, it reveals to us the moments that we are not living in grace. See, you can't give that which you don't have. And when we are not extending grace to others, oftentimes it's a sign that we ourselves are not living in grace. We're not able to extend grace to ourselves. There's a great story that Brené Brown talks about in her book, Rising Strong. And she tells this time of she went to go speak at a conference, and she had to share a hotel room with another one of the speakers. She already was upset that she had to share a hotel room. She gets to the room, sees this other speaker she's going to be sharing the room with, and this person is smoking a cigarette, eating a cinnamon bun, wiping her sticky hands on the couch. Immediately, she is furious. Begins judging the person, what's wrong with her, leaves the conference, has a conversation with a therapist a couple of days later. The therapist asks her, she says, do you think that person was trying the best that she could? Brené Brown replies and says, no, definitely not. She was not doing the best that she could. She sits with that for a while, comes to the realization that because she does a lot of research, comes to the realization through her research that people who do not believe others are doing the best they can are the ones who are the most critical of themselves. While on the other hand, the ones who do believe that everyone is truly doing the best that they can are the people who are, as she terms it, the most wholehearted. The ones who are the most forgiving of themselves, the most compassionate toward themselves. When we cannot extend grace to others, when we're very critical of others, judgmental, self-righteous, it's often a sign that we are critical of ourselves. There's something about ourselves that we don't like. So when we're not living in grace, we are not able to then extend that grace to others. It's a sign that there's some healing in our lives that we are in need of. And then let's ask the question, why is it that judging is so harmful? Why is Paul so against judging? Why does he weave it all throughout this narrative, all throughout this letter? Obviously, the first reason is because it creates disunity. Judging others creates a division, a rift. And Paul's for peace. He's for unity. Second reason why it's so harmful is because it creates arrogance. You begin to see yourself as morally superior, and everyone else is inferior to you. You know what is right. And in the church world, when you are the spokesperson for God, when you clearly know the mind of God and everyone else is wrong, man, I mean, who wants to be around that person? We've all been around those people, and we don't like it. I mean, who likes being around someone that is constantly judging you? I don't want to spend my time with people where I'm constantly feeling judged. You ever, there's a phrase that people in the church world love to use. Maybe it's a sentence. I'll pray for you. I'll pray for them. You know what that is? It's a chocolate-covered turd. It looks great on the outside, but in reality, what's being said is, I know what's best. We know what's best. We'll pray that God reveals to them what we ourselves already know. judging at its finest. And then a third reason why judging is so harmful, because it takes you off your path. We have limited energy. We have finite energy. We're finite beings. When we're expending our energy judging other people and telling other people how to live their lives, we have less energy for the things that we're here to do. We have a path in life to walk. There's certain work for us to do in the world, for us to bring this world into more peace, for us to follow the path that God is laying before us. And when we are giving our time, our focus, our energy to making sure that everyone falls in line with where you already are, there's less time for us to do the good that God desires for us to do. There's less time for us to walk our path. And then here's a third question for us. How does not judging others free us? How does it bring us to life? First, it frees us to love. In Romans chapter 1, verse 28, speaking about humanity, furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled, and then Paul goes on and gives a list, filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways to do evil. He goes through this entire list. Then he says, you, this is chapter 2, verse 1, you therefore, you have no excuse. You who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge the other, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. That's a powerful verse, is it not? It reminds me of Nietzsche's quote, "Be careful. Those who slay monsters, they often become monsters in themselves." Or I think the quote's actually, "Be worried that when you slay monsters, that you don't become a monster yourself." Paul is saying whenever you're judging another person, you end up basically doing the very thing that you're judging. The thing that you are seeing as wrong, well, when you begin judging others, you begin doing the very thing that you see as wrong. There's an inability to love others when you're judging. Your heart is filled with judgment. It squeezes out all the love that you have to give. And so judging, it's so harmful. It's so harmful. When we begin to move from judgment into compassion, we are then filled with love for other people. We might disagree. We might think they're wrong. And yeah, there are things that are wrong. There are things that are evil. Yes, we need to call them out. But when we're judging others, there's no space for us to love. And what truly transforms anyone anyway? It's not pointing fingers. It's not telling anyone what to do, how to be, what to believe, how they're wrong and you're right. It's by loving others. That's what we see embodied in the life of Jesus. In another verse, Paul says, while we were still sinners, Christ loved us. Love is what transforms, not being the moral police. And then when you don't judge, it frees you in a way that you're able to entrust other people to God. You entrust everyone's path to God. Paul mentioned it, chapter 14 earlier, about God being the master. We're able to live that reality. We give up control. When you're trying to control another's path, man, that is draining. That'll take away life and energy from your soul. But when you've given up control and you've entrusted other people to God, you've trusted that there is a spirit that is guiding them just as much as there's a spirit that guides you. There's a level of freedom in that. So it frees you to live. It frees you to, again, walk your path in life. So this week, may you, instead of judging, may you cultivate a heart of compassion, a heart of love. And any time you find yourself judging, may you move to curiosity. May you move to conversation. May you move from a lens of judgment to a lens of compassion, grace, and love for others. Whenever you find yourself judging, may you begin to sift through your own soul and ask all questions about yourself. Well, what is this revealing about me? May you come to discover the depths of what is in your soul. And may that bring healing to you. May you walk your path, and may you entrust others to God in a way that allows them to walk their path. And as you do so, may you find a freedom and a peace that brings joy, life to you, but spills over to you in a way that gives others the freedom to pursue and discover God while they're walking their path. May you work for peace, and may any ways of creating division, may those fall to the wayside so you can bring unity and peace to this world. May the grace and peace of Jesus be with you this week. Amen.